KWFM, South Tucson.
The views of this program are not necessarily the views of KWFM Radio, its management, or its sponsors. The host is solely responsible for its content. Enjoy.
Welcome, everybody, to the Jake Feinberg Show on KWFM 1330 The Star. Great to have you on board with us today. And pioneers were prevalent in the 50s and the 60s. Not guys like Lewis and Clark who chopped down trees, but guys that built up their chops musically and were able to play at the spur of the moment in any setting with any players. These music pioneers' mentality was helped by venues, multiple venues in every major city, so accessibility was not a problem. These pioneers of music were unafraid of pursuing odd rhythms and combining instruments that wouldn't necessarily be commonplace in a square setting. My guest today was one such pioneer. With Charles Lloyd, they became the first American jazz outfit to perform in the Soviet Union. He was a favorite of saxophonist Joe Henderson in a group that featured the likes of Woody Shaw, George Cables, Lenny White, and Tony Waters. He was also one of the founding members of the eclectic group The Fourth Way, which I am currently obsessed with, which included Mike Nock, Michael White, and legendary Bay Area drummer Eddie Marshall. He has been an educator at the Berkelee School of Music and Long Island University, and is a continual force in the field of music. Ron McClure, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the Jake Feinberg Show.
How you doing, Jake?
It's great to have you on board, man. I'm glad you could be part of it.
Yeah.
It's sort of, I've read a lot about, your career, and it's like he had the most natural rhythm, uncanny rhythm. And I wonder how that early on, in your youth, how you developed, how you got to have such good rhythm.
Well, it's mainly, I teach at NYU. You didn't mention that. I've been there for 22 years. My director would be very upset if he didn't.
I'm sorry. So he's currently, listen, I'm a Stony Brook guy, so I'm kind of partial to Long Island University. But
okay.
NYU, there you go.
There,
22 years, we got it.
Anyway, I think it's mainly through listening, in your environment. If you grow up listening to something and you're around people that are talking about it and listening to it and playing it, and you get a chance to rub elbows with those kind of people and get to do it with them, that's how you get it. They're really, you can listen to records and get it too, but I was lucky I caught the tail end of the jazz scene, as a kid, in the 50s. I graduated high school in 59, so, there was a lot happening while I was in high school in jazz. Miles Davis and, Train and, I kind of missed, like, Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and Max Roach, people like that. That was a little before my time. Right. So I grew up like listening to, to Paul Chambers with Philly Joe Jones, Red Garland, Wynton Kelly, Bill Evans, people like that, and I got to play with those guys because, I came to New York and I was in the right place at the right time, and I got to do it. I try to tell people today how to, that don't have that concept, that they really just have to play with people that have it and get it through listening. A lot of my students don't really own records, never really heard, they've heard Kenny G, but they haven't, heard, Paul Chambers.
Yeah, and if you listen to the music coming onto my show, it's like cheesy elevator music, and I'm looking for, Live at the Lighthouse 60. People don't, I just feel like labels have mucked up music so badly anyway.
Well, it's about business. It's about money. It's like government.
Right, and and it's true. I have to ask you quickly, you were born in New Haven, Connecticut?
That's right. 1941, November 22nd.
Did you by chance ever cross paths with Joe Porcaro, Dave Mackay, and Emil Richards?
My God.
No, I'm serious because those guys were like the trifecta.
Those are the guys that I played with in Hartford.
Well, let's talk.
And when I was going to school, Joe Porcaro and I were the house rhythm section at the High Blind Hotel, and we played with Dave Mackay. And Dave Mackay was the guy that turned me on to Working by Miles Davis. He said, you got to listen to Paul Chambers play on the tune 4. That's the time feeling you need to get.
Unbelievable. No, Mackay. Because I knew those guys were like, they were the triumvirate that eventually made it out to Southern California. But
those are the guys who were probably the two most influential people. It's amazing. I talk about synchronicity that you would call their names. Those are the guys who were probably the two most influential people in my early development.
And aside from recommending tunes, talk about other ways that they were supportive of you.
Well, they they turned me on to music I should listen to. They talked to me about my time and my choice of notes and my intonation and my sound, and we're very supportive in every way. I mean, they built my confidence and they taught me tunes, and they were like my gurus.
Do you chalk it up to, we have barely even started your career. We're still in its infancy, but when I look at Ron McClure, when I look at your career, how much do you account for, the hard work and playing with people and getting out there and just doing it, and then also the serendipity? Some people would call it timing. I tend to think that you guys are just part of this. I don't know. You cross paths with pretty amazing people.
Yeah, well, I caught the tail end of the jazz scene. When I graduated in high school, I went to Hart College of Music in the '60s and graduated in '63 and came to New York. Bill Evans Trio was still playing, and Miles and Train. I went down to the Village Gate and heard Coltrane with Derek Dolphy sitting in, and Mingus, and the real stuff. I got to play with so many people that were still viable then. I took Paul Chambers' place with Wynton Kelly Trio because I was playing opposite the Wynton Kelly Trio with Wes Montgomery. I was playing with Maynard Ferguson's band, and Paul was very ill then, and he didn't show up. So Jimmy Cobb just hit a couple rim shots on the snare drum. We were all sitting there waiting to hear them, and he pointed at me with a drumstick and just signaled for me to come up there, and I went up there and played with them, and they looked around and smiled. Same thing happened a month later at the Village Gate. Ron Carter was playing with them, and he was late. They hired me. They took my number. And a couple of weeks later, they called me and hired me. Talk about serendipitous. Wow.
Exactly.
Being in the right place at the right time has a lot to do with it. There are a lot of great players that never got any recognition, because they weren't in the right place at the right time, et cetera, and maybe they didn't want it, or God only knew.
Well, there was also, I remember talking to the pianist Mike Wolf, and he told a really fascinating story about being in a club. Maybe it was the Both And, or I don't know. It was out in San Francisco.
Played there, yeah.
And a cat came up to him. I think it was an African American guy, and he said, "You MFer, you can't play worth nothing. You can't do nothing." And he really kind of, and he was obviously threatened. Mike could play, obviously, but it was a test. Mike said he went back to his house. He said he didn't leave his house for 2 weeks. And then it took enough gall to get up and say, you know what, I'm not going to listen to this trash. I'm going to go out and play the music. And I wonder how many, because to me, it was, even though there was a lot of love and the values were very different, I also feel like it was pretty competitive as well.
It was competitive, and there's also the racial thing. I've had guys come up to me and say the same thing, and Wynton Kelly told me, he said, you wouldn't believe what I have to go through to keep you in my band, because the brothers would say, how come you hire this white guy? And he said, well, come down here and play, and you'll know. He said he told me he felt as comfortable playing with me as anybody else. And then they would come and they say, yeah, you can play. I remember Louis Hayes told me, he said, yeah, I heard about you. Yeah, you can play. We could actually play together. He said, I'm not supposed to talk to anybody like you. Because I come from Detroit. We're supposed to worry about how we look and just play those. And, that element still, exists. Anybody doesn't think so in this country, just watch politics, We have a black president. And it works both ways, and it's ridiculous, but it does exist.
Yeah, but for some reason, it's by the Neanderthals. They don't think it's very hip that we have a black president, though.
No, a lot of people just can't stand the idea. The Congress has been dedicated to destroying him.
Mm-hmm.
What else? The man is brilliant. He's done a wonderful job, and he's failed, and their whole job is to destroy him. Meanwhile, nothing gets done because of that. What else is it?
How did in your mind? I don't think there's a simple answer, and I certainly don't want to spend a lot of time on it. But you were growing up, like you said, you caught that tail end, the Philly Joe Jones, and the New York scene. Civil rights was percolating, but there was a lot of overt racism. But my question for you is, when did that cynicism start to seep in? It's clearly we're just totally engulfed in it now. But when did we go from sort of this culture of inventiveness, even and especially in music, and opportunity, accessibility, to one of just basically saying, like, to a leader like Barack Obama, who, by all accounts, is a pretty moderate person with a beautiful family and a good guy. We want to tear down those kinds of people because they're too good. When did he get so resentful?
Well, I think this kind of always been there. I mean, I just think it just raises its ugly head at different times. I mean, it's certainly been true. I mean, I've heard about it since way before, there were times when we couldn't have worked together. I mean, literally,
right.
In the South especially, and I've seen it in the South, it's more pronounced. I mean, New York's a place, you don't see too much of that here. I mean, people tend to look at each other for what they do rather than, what they look like. But, I mean, it's always been there. I don't think it suddenly changed. I just think that it just comes out every now and then, and it's very unfortunate. But it's fear and ignorance. It's nothing else. People are people, and most of my heroes were black and older than me, and when I got to meet them, they were wonderful to me, because they were into the music. I mean, it's the small people with small minds that are kind of stupid that deal with that because it's out of fear and ignorance. It's all fear-based.
Exactly, but also let's go back to the black heroes, people like Dizzy or Joe Henderson. Sure. Those guys were not going to take any crap. They would actually be outspoken. Would they not speak out if they were not going to be compensated? Or I mean, I know, for instance, when with Cal Jader, when he took his band out with Willie Bobo and Mongo, he really had to stand up for those guys because there was a lot of harsh treatment. It seems to me people were much more secure, be able to poke fun at their ethnicity or whatever it was, and at the same time also stand up for just blatant ignorance and fear. There's not enough in today's world. It seems people are just afraid that they're going to be destroyed if they speak up against this fear.
Yeah, I see that too. I mean, I see that right now with the Rush Limbaugh comments that he's been making about women.
Hush Bimbo, right?
I mean, that's pretty stupid. I mean, I knew Dizzy and I played with Joe, of course, and those guys were so far above it. I mean, that it didn't exist. I mean, they saw people as people. I went to Cuba with Dizzy Gillespie and Stan Getz in 1977, and I talked to Dizzy all the time, and he was just one of the guys. Joe Henderson was brilliant, and he spoke like 7 different languages. I mean, there was. He'd just call me up and talk to me for like an hour and a half at any time. And he was the greatest to work with too. I mean, he's a wonderful musician, a wonderful man.
What would you guys? It's so cool that because a lot of George Cable said that Joe was just really soft spoken. He would disappear after.
He was. He would just disappear. I mean, he was the Phantom, and that's why they call him the Phantom because he'd see a sign that said San Francisco. He'd just go home in the middle of a tour. He did that. I mean, he did that I was supposed to go to Europe with him, and all of a sudden he wasn't here anymore. He just went home. He decided not to play the gig at the Vanguard that we had.
What kinds of? I just really curiously. I mean, what kinds of? When he would call you up, what would you guys talk about? I mean, obviously he wasn't.
We'd talk about music and he'd say, well, have you heard this? And he would sit on the train in Europe and he'd just play things. I mean, what do you think? I got this David Friesen record. What do you think about this? And what do you think about Mal Waldron? He only plays in the middle register. I mean, plays great tunes, but he only plays in the middle register. What do you think about that? I mean, he would talk like that, and he wanted to know what I thought.
These are the behind the scenes stories that I can go to my
stuff.
I can go to my grave comfortable now. I mean, this is the
it's a real deal. I know these guys as people and friends. I mean, we shared cabs and trains and sometimes even hotel rooms together. It was great. I feel very lucky to have been able to play with people like Monk. I mean, he didn't talk to me a great deal, but he was great. And he would ask his manager, how's Ronnie doing? I like him. But he wouldn't tell you anything to me. I mean, he just hung out with the Baroness.
I have to feel that, that in some ways you must have, even after all the gigs, you felt like you were actually helping society move along as well. I mean,
I never quite thought of it that way.
Exactly. But
I don't know. I was just part of it. It was just it was my life. I mean, in 1 week's time, I played with 3 generations of Miles Davis's rhythm section. I was playing with Wynton Kelly and Jimmy Cobb. In the afternoon, I played with Miles at the Vanguard. He didn't show up. I was playing with Joe Henderson, Wayne Shorter, Herbie Hancock, and Tony Williams. And then I went on the road with Charles Lloyd to play with Jack and Keith. I mean, all within a week. And I just realized, holy cow, I actually did that in a week. I mean, wow, that's really significant. I mean, not that it's going to make me any money or give me any awards, but, I mean, to have been there, to have been able to do something like that, I mean, the reward is in the doing of it.
Hey, as the skipper Henry Franklin would say, that's legacy, baby.
I mean, that's really, I mean, wow, what an opportunity. How many people can say that? I mean, not that, you know.
That's why I do this. That's why I do this show.
When I figured it out.
I mean, you know, at the end of the day, people are like, yo, you know, isn't it time? You know, like you got to make a move, you got to grow, you got to move into it. No, I don't, because then I got to sell out, and I can't do. You have
to make a living too, you know, and you know, now it's like it's about what can you do for me, and like you know how many. I get a gig and they say, how many people will you have? I said, how would I know?
Right.
I mean, I don't know. I'll get a band together, get the music together. I mean, I'm not going to tell you how many people are going to come. How would I know that? I mean, I'm going to call people and say, are you coming? I mean, there are people that are really good at that. I mean, I work with Dave Liebman, who's probably one of the best organizers of people and getting gigs and doing things. I mean, he's amazing at how organized he is.
Right. You have to be organized, but you know, listen, we're talking with Ron McClure, currently 22 years at New York University, fine institution, and I will never make that mistake again. But let's take a listen to some clip of music here, and this is Ron McClure with a bunch of classic cats. We'll come back and talk about it, okay?
Cool.
The first track that I chose, you're not really. But don't worry, man.
Ebony Plaza.
We are going to be firing up Rama. You know, first of all, just who was on vocals?
That was Michael White.
Michael White was okay. So
Michael White did the yeah, he did all that.
Yeah, we heard
Ebony Plaza they called it, and I mean that was just two of them was without the white guys in the band.
and the Ebony what? Ebony what?
Ebony Plaza was the title of that. It was they wrote it together. It was a little African kind of piece.
And so I assume that he also played. I mean, he did the flute and the violin track.
I think they did it. I don't think they did any overdubbing. That's the way they did it. They played. Eddie Marshall played flute, and I mean he was sitting at the drums with you could hear the hi-hat chomping away, and he was playing the flute into a mic. He wasn't using his hands. I mean, I think that was direct. We didn't do any overdubbing.
It's just these guys were the merry pranksters of music. I mean, this is. Did you? I was curious. I was looking at some John Clemmer records.
I played with him actually for a while.
I was figuring because I saw there's a couple albums out, live shows from the Grove in Los Angeles. Something Wilton Felder was on bass, but I'm like, it was Mike Nock and Eddie Marshall. I'm like, what a hip group. And in the 2 minutes we have before we go to the break, just let's start talking about how that all came to fruition.
The Fourth Way?
Yes.
Well, I was playing with Charles Lloyd opposite them in Berkelee, California, and Peter Marshall was the bass player at that time. I was playing with Jack and Keith and Charles, and then that ended in '69. And I told Mike Nock, if you ever need a bass player, I'd like to live in San Francisco. I said, I'm on my way to Capitol Records to sign a contract. We need a bass player. You want to come?
Oh, God. Here we go. Serendipity.
I dropped out of New York and went out there in 1969 and stayed there for about 4 years.
And it seemed to me like you guys really clicked right away. I mean, it wasn't even it didn't take any time at all.
Well, it was so unique and unusual. I mean, we're all like really. I knew Eddie Marshall from back east. I mean, I heard him when I was playing at the High Blonde Hotel. He was playing with Toshiko and Charlie Mariano and Gene Chirico.
I didn't realize
he was from Springfield. I was from Harton, New Haven, so we were kind of like. Of course, he just passed away last year, unfortunately. And Michael White, I had played with Jerry Hahn, with Jack DeJohnette. Well, in 1966, there was an Arabian. Jerry Hahn,
I know it well.
Noel Jukes, Jack DeJohnette, and myself.
That was when I first discovered you. Was with it was actually on what was the name of that funky label? I can see Arhoolie.
Changes.
Arhoolie label.
Arhoolie.
Yes.
Something like that. I think I have a CD of Changes, or maybe that's different.
Jerry Hahn did an interview with me, and the dictaphone fell out of my pocket on the Lower East Side, and he will never talk to me again. So
he will never talk to you again.
Ron, we're going to do a whole lot more with the mighty bassist Ron McClure, a lot more tunes with him in it. We'll come back right on the other side of the break. Hang loose. This is the Jake Feinberg Show on KWFM 1330, The Star.
This is the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll be right back.
CNN Radio, I'm Shelby Lynn. 36 people are dead, and that number could climb as rescue workers in 11 states continue digging through the rubble that used to be homes and businesses. Severe weather swept through almost a dozen states over the past day. In hard-hit Moscow, Ohio, residents are telling scary stories. This woman survived, but says a local official didn't make it to safety.
They was trying to get to the basement and didn't make it, and she got crushed. And her son was right with her, but he tried to dig them out, and he couldn't do it.
There's still a threat of severe weather in southern Georgia and northern Florida this hour. In all, weather experts say almost 100 tornadoes ripped through almost a dozen states over the past couple days. Voters in Washington state are deciding who they want as the Republican presidential candidate in caucuses there today. There's 40 delegates at stake in the race. The most trusted name in news, this is CNN Radio.
Mark Twain once said that the secret of success was making your vocation your vacation. And I can't think of anything I'd rather do than save folks money on their car insurance with Geico. I'm proud to have helped millions of drivers save and save big. Hundreds of dollars a year. Come to think of it, my bosses say I should take a vacation. I'll probably go to the beach, get a little sun, see if anyone needs to save money on their car insurance. There I go again.
For a free rate quote, visit geico.com to see how much you could save. Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Wow, we have so much we have to do around the house.
Awesome! A reason to go to the tool mega sale at Sears this week.
Fix the car.
Up to 50% off all Craftsman Mechanics tool sets. Check.
And the garage is a mess.
Up to 50% off Craftsman tool storage. Booyah!
And the faucet is... Honey, are you okay?
I'm just so excited.
Tackle your to-do list at the Tool Mega Sale this week only at Sears. Hundreds of Craftsman tools on sale in one place. Craftsman, trust in your hands. Exclusions apply. See store for details.
When you were a kid, you had all sorts of toys. Toy cars, boats, trucks, entire toy boxes full of fun. Of course, you never really outgrow your toys, do you? It's just that now, instead of a box full, you have a garage full. Cars, trucks, boats, motorcycles, ATVs, and more. As you get older, your love of toys just gets stronger. So protect those toys the best way possible by switching to Allstate. An Allstate agent can help do the switching, paperwork, bundle all your policies together, and even find you a bunch of discounts. So if you love your toys, make sure you protect your toys by making one call to an Allstate agent.
Protect all your toys with Allstate. Find an agent near you at allstate.com today. Subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Allstate Property and Casualty Insurance Company and Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and their affiliates, Northbrook, Illinois.
Dollar for dollar, nobody protects you like Allstate.
Folks, this is Jake Feinberg. One of the first things I wanted to do when I moved to Tucson was find authentic Chinese cuisine. After a tip from the Chinese Student Association, I headed over to Badar Chinese Restaurant. Well, it's been 7 years, and I have never looked back. Located at 7321 East Broadway Boulevard, Badar has been a family-run operation since 1992. The award-winning chef produces succulent dishes from sizzling ginger chicken to salt and pepper shrimp. The thing that separates Badar from the rest is that the chef procures ancient oriental dishes with the exotic island flair of Taiwan. Most importantly, there are no gimmicks or razzle-dazzle at Badar. You won't find any flat-screen TVs or karaoke machines. Badar is a place to go enjoy good food and spend time with your family. It exudes peace and tranquility after a long week of work. So come down and check out Badar Chinese Restaurant. Hong Hao Chu. It's that good. Folks, this is Jake Feinberg. When it came time to decide where to buy my daughter a piano last year, the choice was easy. We got it at Hackenberg & Sons Piano Company. Located at 4333 East Broadway Boulevard, Hackenberg & Sons is Tucson's longest-running family-owned piano business. Run by 3 brothers and a son, they pride themselves on superior instruments and customer satisfaction. It's why they've been around so long. And it's why their pianos are used at the University of Arizona, Pima Community College, and many other prestigious institutions. So whether it's for your child, business, or yourself, when you buy a piano, make sure you go to Hackenberg & Sons. It'll be the beginning of a long-lasting partnership. For more information, visit them at hackenbergpiano.com.
Even the ancient Romans knew that music can soothe the savage beast. But what if there's a beast lurking in your old stereo? Maybe it's popping static, garbled distortion, a skip in the record, or worse, dead silence. Stereo Hospital can restore smooth sound to your receiver, amp, turntable, CD player, or speakers. At the same Midtown location, 4044 East Speedway, for 10 years, Stereo Hospital might be the last shop in town doing quick, guaranteed repairs on vintage and modern stereos. Owner Jeff Brucker has over 40 years' experience as an electronic technician, and he is happy to bring back the joy and memories only your music collection provides. Log on to stereohospital.com or call 722-4610, or just bring that mean old stereo in today. Stereo Hospital at 4044 East Speedway, inside Metronome Music near Alvernon, to calm the beast.
In this day and age, people have a lot to protect. You want to know that when you're insuring valuable goods, you have an agent you can trust. Craig Pretzinger is that agent. For auto, home, and life insurance, the Pretzinger Agency is Tucson's most honest and flexible insurance company. Have off-road vehicles or motorhomes? Pretzinger can cover that as well. Pretzinger Agency at 299-5810, located across the street from Sullivan's Steakhouse on the southwest corner of River and Campbell. Trust, compassion, and service. The whole package at Pretzinger Agency. Call 299-5810 or text QUOTE to 602-459-5533 to receive a no-obligation quote. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Be a part of a new coalition with Jake Feinberg. The second half of my show starts right now. And I got the name for that title, not from Eldridge Cleaver, but from Live from the Lighthouse with Joe Henderson and the bassist that's joining me today, Ron McClure. Ron, welcome back.
Thank you.
You know, let's get to a track of music that you did play bass on, and we'll come back and talk about it. Jader out.
Wow. I haven't. I thought you had the wrong guy because I hardly remember that.
that is you. I mean,
yeah,
you know,
I do. Remember playing with Cal.
You know, it's funny because Cal Jader, to me, he was such an interesting cat because, like, this album, Acqua Dolce, is, you know, he did it with the Escovedo brothers and yourself and Al Zuleika and guys like that. But, you know, even on the title track, I mean, Acqua Dolce, Cal doesn't even play a solo on it.
He came into the date with a six-pack and asked the producer what they were going to do. He had no idea. I mean, that's how detached he was from doing that record.
Well,
I was just doing a session for Fantasy. I mean, somebody hooked me up with him. We didn't talk or meet or rehearse or anything. It was just a session, you know.
When was the first time that you sort of, you know, played in a group that had additional percussion aside from the trap set?
Gee, good question. Not too much of that, actually. I mean, I remember I played with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and we had Don Elias played percussion. That was in '74. And with Joe Henderson, Tony Waters. I mean, I think he overdubbed some of that stuff, actually.
The question, when did I'm wondering the first time, because I know it's sort of, you know, obviously people can trace it back to Chano Pozo and Dizzy and then with Mongo and stuff like that. But I mean, did you recall, like, on the scene, like, catching a group and saying, wow, that's interesting, they incorporated a conga drum or timbales, you know, because, I mean, you had the Escovedo brothers. This was '71 was when that album was made.
Yeah, that's definitely, I mean, when people ask me if I play Latin bass, I say, no, you got the wrong gringo. That's not my thing. I mean, I could do my imitation of it, but, I mean, I just went and heard the music of Kachow at Lincoln Center, you know, with the bass player that plays with the Lincoln Center Orchestra. It was wonderful, but, I mean, it's definitely not my thing. I didn't grow up doing that, you know.
So, talk about from a professional point of view is a great lead-in. How do you play an idiom of music that you are clearly, like you said, I'm not your gringo?
Yeah, I mean, really. I mean, Latin music is, I mean, it's a whole other language. I had a hard time playing rock and roll. I mean, when I went with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, playing with a giant amp with a Fender bass, after playing with Charles Lloyd, I mean, or the Fourth Way, you know, playing acoustic bass, which is more of a free flow of consciousness. But I mean, in rock and roll, I mean, the bass players play patterns, and you have this electric instrument, and it's loud. It's, you know, it's a different language. It's a whole different thing. I mean, but I love a challenge. I mean, I have a solo piano gig in New York where I just came back from it today. I mean, I play solo piano like 2 or 3 days a week.
What venue?
It's at a McDonald's, if you believe it or not, at World Trade Center.
You have to, and what, you do that every Saturday?
I do every Saturday and Wednesday. My girlfriend plays the other days, and there's another guy on Sunday. I've been there about 8 years. They've had a piano player there every week, every day for like the last 20 years or more.
All right, this summer when I bring the family back home, I'm coming to see you at McDonald's.
Definitely. I mean, that's my new thing. I'm playing more piano lately than bass. I mean, I teach. I use the piano to play and on the gig, and I use it to teach and to write. And I have some gigs coming up as a bass player too. But it's not as much as it used to be. The whole scene is really slowed down.
You know, as a guy I wanted to ask you about, because he was one of the early guys that I got into jazz with, and not many people have worked with him, and you actually studied under him, was Don Sebesky.
Oh, yeah.
Could you talk about what made Don such an improvisational cat?
Well, I mean, he was a master arranger, and he played trombone with Maynard Ferguson's band, which I did earlier. I mean, I've known him a long time, and I took his course. It was like 30 weeks, and Ron Carter was in that class too. And he's just a masterful arranger. He did a lot of commercial arranging, and his course was mostly about recording and writing for the studio. It wasn't so much about stuff that I'm interested. I mean, I played with George Russell, and Maynard's band was much more cutting edge writing. Mm-hmm. I mean. But he was more of a commercial arranger. I mean, I never thought he was cutting edge in terms of musical concepts.
Yeah, improvisational was the wrong word. I
don't see him in that light. He's more of like a studio arranger.
He seemed to catch on quickly, and you could be a better judge than this from an orchestration standpoint, by the jazz rock sort of fusion that was happening in the late '60s.
Yeah, well, he did that because I mean that's what the companies wanted him to do, And I mean it's like all those the CTI recordings and stuff, I mean it's kind of that's what was happening around that period in the 70s. I mean, people started to look to reach a wider audience, so they started combining things. So a lot of it didn't really work too well, in my opinion. I mean, I was never terribly fond of it. Some of it did, some of it was great, but a lot of it was just an attempt to try to make more money.
In your mind, like when did that? What was the first year where it was like all of a sudden it mattered more about if a limo was coming to pick up a big guy or the when did contracts really come into play? Because none of you guys were getting rich playing at the Lighthouse with Joe. You go on tour, you'd play on the road. It was relatively inexpensive to stay in hotels. Maybe you even had to pay your own hotel. I don't know, but
yeah, I did. I mean, well, Joe was complaining that. I mean, he said it's it's hard to have a band because it just costs so much. We had to bring instruments. We had to bring the piano, the drums, the bass, and the amp. Nobody had any of these things. I don't bring anything anymore because they have basses and they have amps and drums and piano. People read everything. Nobody travels with instruments anymore, especially since 9/11. It's just too much. It's too much of an expense, and then the hotels, and it's really hard. People ask me why I don't have my own band. I said, well, sit down, I'll tell you, because I mean, first of all, I'm not box office draw, and it's they want to make money. I mean, the business. I mean, around '69 when Miles went to Electric Music with Bitches Brew. I mean, everything started to change. I mean, he wanted some of that money. He saw Sly making, and he wanted to reach a wider audience too. Started doing Cyndi Lauper tunes, and hiring rock people, I mean, that just played one thing. They didn't play like Ron Carter and Herbie did,
Well, and it's funny you bring that up because you with Charles Lloyd was maybe one of the only jazz groups that played at the Fillmore West.
Yeah, we played. That's it. I mean, and we weren't the first in rock. By the way, George Vacuum brought us, but he had brought Benny Goodman years before, and probably Sonny Rollins. He managed both of those groups before we went in '67. But I mean, yeah, we played at the Fillmore. Charles didn't want to play in the saloons, as he called them. We played large venues and college concerts. We used to play at Reed College in Portland, and we did these big venues. We didn't do a lot of jazz clubs. We never played the Vanguard. We never worked in New York. Really, played the Village Gate opposite Miles once, but we didn't play in the saloons. It was like he wanted to reach a wider audience, and he did. I mean, he had the kind of charisma to do that. I wish I had that.
You guys, it says here, speaking of the Lloyd group with Keith Jarrett and Jack DeJohnette, who will be on the show next week with Ron McClure, they were the first American group to play at a Soviet jazz festival.
Festival, yeah.
Yes, and then you also appeared at the Fillmore. In the remaining moments, we have time here, but I wanted to play some more music because you really are the bridge to the Fourth Way, and I've taken a tremendous interest in this group. So let's take a listen to this track, and we'll come back and talk some more.
Cool.
as we fade out on the Eddie Marshall solo. I miss. Could you talk a little bit? First of all, my question is, what audience did Capitol tell Mike Nock to appeal to with that music?
I don't think they did. I mean, I think it was the idea that it was a jazz violin, and John Palladino was the producer, and he didn't have a lot to say in the studio. I mean, I didn't know him. He had produced, other records for Capitol, but he just kind of sat there and let us do what we do. We did one record in the studio in L.A. in the Capitol building, and he was just there. And the other one, the Sun and Moon, that's from the Orleans House in Berkelee. Then we did a live record in Montreux in 1970. I played electric bass. I played a Hohner fretless electric bass because we couldn't afford to bring the bass. And Jaco Pastorius told me he got the idea for fretless bass from that record. And
That's
he played me licks from that he obviously knew. I mean, he studied all that. I said, really?
It's so classic because you listen to that. I mean, I don't even know. I'm not a musician, but it seemed like more consciousness, a stream of consciousness.
Well, it's pretty free. I mean, we were like some space cadets. I mean, that was out there.
I love.
I mean, that was out. The solo I played was just like off the wall. I mean, I don't know. It was just like, form. Forget about it. I mean, like that started off as tune. But I mean, that's what we played. I mean, we did a lot of free music, and we played tunes too, and we played some funk things, and we played some standards. We did a whole eclectic thing. We did a lot of different things. But it was the idea. I think it was kind of a forerunner to the Mahavishnu Orchestra. I mean, with John Goodman, violin player, and it's kind of the beginning of all that fusion stuff.
Absolutely, you guys are the trendsetters, and let's get a little bit more taste of it before we come back, because I want to finish with one final point.
Okay.
In our final, I mean, what beautiful music. It strikes me, Ron, that it was at the time hip to be free form, and that's the whole problem with music now, is that everything has to be formed and
calculated, and people have an agenda they have to fit to. I mean, that was just really. I mean, I was enjoying listening to it even on the phone. I mean, it was just the way we played. It wasn't premeditated at all. I mean, it was very open and free, and that was the beauty of that band and the Charles Lloyd band before that. I mean, it was the band I play with now, Quest, is very much like that. We actually made a whole record called Of One Mind on CMP that's all free. We didn't have any tunes at all. Probably the best thing we ever did.
You know, as you move forward, we've talked a little bit about it, but, you know, how are you going to, being that you went through this sort of golden era and now you're still, how are you going to keep your sanity as you move forward? The McDonald's gig, what else have you got going on, the band you have? Go ahead.
Well, I play with Dave Lehman Quest, with Richie Byrick and Billy Hart, and I just made, speaking of violin, I've been recording with this guy, Gabe Tarasiano. He's 18 years old. He goes to NEC and Tufts in Boston. He came into NYU last year, and I grabbed him and made a record. It's called Crunch Time. It just came out on Steeplechase. We did another one called Ready or Not, which will be out next year on Steeplechase. There's some young guys from NYU, students, grad students, but I mean, I have to make projects for myself. I mean, my phone doesn't ring. I don't get calls from Herbie Hancock and Charles Lloyd and Monk anymore and people like that.
Right.
I'm 70 years old, and the kids are doing a lot, and my role has changed, and it's a little confusing right now, actually, to see where I'm going in terms of keeping the music going. I mean, I don't go out and get in line with these kids to get these nickel and dime gigs that exist out here. They're places that have music, but I don't really want to go back to that. Playing for the Door.
No, and you did that.
I did that like 40, 50 years ago. I mean, that's what all the kids, well, let's go get a gig. You can get a gig and, end up costing you more money than you could make just to do it, and play for people who aren't listening, too. I mean, doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, I just got a couple tours. Quest is going to Europe in October, and we're playing at Birdland in New York next February. And we have a record we just made, which may or may not come out. I don't know. It's a different world now. I have no idea. I can't really answer your question. It's just
you don't have to, Ron. I
mean, I can't. I wish I knew.
I just wanted to say, you've been a hero of mine for a long time.
Well, thank you. That's nice to hear.
As long as my show stays on the air, history will be preserved and hopefully build a bridge to the future before we collapse as a society.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hope we don't, but I mean, that's always possible. It all ties in with what's going on in the world, unfortunately, with the economy right now. It's really killed the music business. No, people don't buy CDs anymore. They don't go out like they used to. They stay home and go on the internet and download things.
Well, we got to run, Ron. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Cool.
We'll talk to you soon.